In the quiet streets of a modest township, where the sound of children laughing mixes with the hum of daily life, something extraordinary was taking shape. Far from the towering skyscrapers of Silicon Valley, away from the glass boardrooms of billion-dollar corporations, a lone inventor was assembling a machine that would rattle the very foundations of how the world thinks about technology. His workshop was not filled with the sleek precision of robotics labs or the sterile perfection of multinational research centers. Instead, it was a cramped space, walls lined with improvised shelves and salvaged parts, tools worn from use, and a table cluttered with circuit boards that bore the scars of countless experiments. Yet here, in the dust and struggle, a hidden African invention was born, one that Silicon Valley could neither predict nor ignore. For decades, the world has been told where innovation comes from. The West, with its polished image of genius entrepreneurs and visionary investors, has dominated the story of technology. When people think of breakthroughs, they imagine California highways lined with Teslas, Google engineers tapping away at futuristic algorithms, and venture capitalists shaking hands over multi-million-dollar deals. But every so often, the world is reminded that innovation has no borders. It erupts where it is least expected, nurtured by necessity, sharpened by struggle, and driven not by profit but by survival and imagination. Africa, often cast in narratives of poverty and dependency, has quietly nurtured minds that refuse to be limited by circumstance. This is where the story begins, with a man who looked at the world not as it was, but as it could be. James Carter, an American engineer traveling across Africa, first heard whispers about it while attending a renewable energy summit in Johannesburg. It wasn't on the official program. Instead, it floated through the crowded conversations of inventors and students, spoken with half-belief and cautious wonder. There's a man out there, someone said, who has built a machine that powers itself. No fuel. No grid.
No endless recharging.
James dismissed it at first, chalking it up to exaggeration or wishful thinking. Yet, something about the way it was spoken, the mixture of skepticism and awe, stuck with him. Weeks later, he found himself in a remote town, standing outside a workshop that looked anything but revolutionary. Inside, the inventor greeted him with hands stained from oil and wires, his eyes burning with quiet determination. His name was Daniel, a self-taught engineer who had grown up dismantling radios and fixing old generators for his neighbors. What he showed James that day would forever alter his understanding of what was possible. In the center of the workshop stood a vehicle, sleek in shape but rough around the edges, its design clearly born from resourcefulness rather than factory precision. Daniel turned a key, and the machine hummed to life, not with the roar of combustion or the silence of a drained battery, but with a steady rhythm that seemed to draw its energy from nowhere. James leaned closer, searching for fuel lines, for charging ports, for some trick of illusion. There were none. This, Daniel said, his voice calm but resolute, is a car that never needs to refuel. It charges itself as it moves. James felt the hair on his arms rise. He had spent years in the American automotive industry, where billions of dollars were poured into electric vehicle research, battery efficiency, and solar integration. The idea of a self-sustaining system was whispered in corporate halls but dismissed as impossible. Yet here it was, in front of him, running smoothly in a workshop thousands of miles from Silicon Valley. News of inventions like these often meet resistance. The scientific world demands proof, peer-reviewed data, and detailed explanations. Corporations demand patents, production models, and the promise of profit. But Daniel had none of these. What he had was a machine that worked, tested on dusty roads where children chased it with cheers, and elders shook their heads in disbelief. James watched as Daniel drove it across the town, the vehicle gliding over uneven paths without hesitation. The people gathered, clapping, recording on their phones, whispering that perhaps Africa had given birth to something the world would one day remember.
But behind the admiration lays a shadow of danger.
For if such an invention could truly disrupt the need for fuel or charging stations, it would also disrupt billion-dollar industries. Oil, gas, electricity providers, and even the largest tech companies would feel threatened. James knew that Silicon Valley thrived on innovation but guarded its profits fiercely. A self-powered vehicle wasn't just a breakthrough, it was a revolution. And revolutions were never welcomed by those who benefited from the status quo. As night fell, James sat with Daniel under the dim light of a single bulb, the machine still parked outside, a silent reminder of what had just transpired. "Why haven't you taken this to the world?" James asked. Daniel smiled, a weary smile that carried years of rejection and suspicion. "I tried," he said. "They told me it was impossible, that I was lying. Some wanted to buy it, but not to build it, to bury it. So I kept building, kept proving, waiting for the right time." The story of the hidden African invention is not merely about science or engineering. It is about the courage to imagine beyond limits, to create without permission, to persist despite ridicule. It is about the clash between grassroots ingenuity and global powers, between the dreams of one man and the machinery of industries that fear being left behind. James, caught between his world of corporate pragmatism and the raw reality of Daniel's workshop, realized he was witnessing not just a machine, but a battle for the future. And so the journey began, a journey to uncover how far this invention could go, how much resistance it would meet, and whether the truth could survive in a world where profits often outweigh progress. The road ahead would not be easy. Forces larger than Daniel could ever imagine were already stirring, forces that did not want the world to believe. But in that small African town, with the hum of a self-powered machine echoing through the night, the seeds of change had been planted. The following morning, James awoke to the faint sounds of hammers and metal scraping. Daniel was already working, his hands moving with the rhythm of a man who had long accepted that his life's calling left no room for rest. James stepped outside and saw him adjusting a panel, wires dangling, sparks flickering in the air. The vehicle looked alive, not like a machine built in some factory line, but like a creature evolving through the persistence of its maker. James felt torn. He had flown across the ocean to explore opportunities in renewable technology, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. In Silicon Valley, talk of disruptive technology was often just marketing spin. Startups promised the world but delivered little beyond slick presentations and inflated valuations. Here, without investors, without polished slides, without corporate jargon, Daniel had crafted something that could rewrite the rules. It was raw, imperfect, but undeniable. As James observed, Daniel paused and turned to him. "You look unsettled," he said.
James forced a smile.
"I'm an engineer. I was trained to believe in equations, in tested theories. What I saw yesterday, what I'm seeing now, doesn't fit into any model I know."
It feel like magic.
Daniel shook his head, his eyes sharp. "It is not magic. It is persistence. When everyone says something cannot be done, it means they have not tried long enough. I tried, and I failed again and again. But the failure did not stop me. That's all this is, one more attempt that finally worked." The words struck James with a truth he could not ignore. In Silicon Valley, failure was romanticized as part of the entrepreneurial journey, but only when backed by millions of dollars. Daniel had failed not in the comfort of venture capital, but in the solitude of hunger and ridicule. And yet, he had succeeded. The more James thought about it, the more conflicted he felt. He wanted to help Daniel, to give this invention the stage it deserved. But he also knew how the world of technology worked. He had seen projects vanish when they threatened the interests of powerful players. Promises of partnership often disguise strategies to suppress competition. If this machine ever entered the global market, it would spark chaos. Oil companies would see their empires crumble. Utility providers would fight tooth and nail. Even electric vehicle giants, hailed as saviors of the planet, would resist. After all, if cars could power themselves, who would need charging stations or battery swaps? That evening, James made a call to an old colleague back in California, a venture capitalist named Robert Hale, who prided himself on investing in bold, world-changing ideas. "Rob, I've seen something," James whispered into the phone. "It's unlike anything we've ever discussed. A machine that powers itself." There was a long silence on the other end, then a chuckle.
"You've been in the sun too long, my friend."
"Perpetual motion is a fantasy. Physics doesn't allow it." "I saw it with my own eyes," James insisted. "It's real. It works." Robert's tone shifted, curiosity breaking through the skepticism. "Send me proof."
Video, schematic, anything.
"If what you're saying is true, this could make Tesla look like a toy company."
James hesitated.
He knew Daniel's caution, his fear of betrayal.
Tout expose invention without Daniel's, consent felt like a violation.
Yet, the temptation of recognition, the chance to bring it to the world, gnawed at him. He promised Robert nothing, ended the call, and sat in silence, staring at the dimly lit workshop where Daniel continued his work, unaware of the storm that might soon descend. Days turned into weeks. James spent more time with Daniel, learning his story. Daniel had grown up in hardship, a childhood filled with broken machines that he taught himself to repair because no one else could. He was not university trained. He had no degrees framed on the wall. His education came from trial, error, and necessity. When the power failed in his village, he experimented with ways to keep the lights on. When fuel became scarce, he tinkered with engines until he found ways to stretch every drop. His invention was not born from luxury, but from survival. One afternoon, James asked, "Do you realize what this could mean for the world?"
For Africa.
Daniel looked away for a moment, his voice softer than usual. "I didn't build it for the world.
I built it for the children here.
So they won't have to walk miles for water. So hospitals won't lose power in the middle of the night.
If the world want it, they will come.
But I will not beg them to believe." The simplicity of that statement humbled James. In Silicon Valley, inventions were often created with the goal of becoming unicorn companies, valued in the billions. Here, the invention was born to solve human problems, to keep children alive, to bring dignity to communities long forgotten. It was purpose, not profit, that guided Daniel's hands. Yet word was spreading. Videos filmed by curious villagers began to appear on obscure corners of the internet. A car moving without refueling.
A machine humming without wear.
At first, most dismissed them as fake, clever edits meant to deceive. But a small group of online enthusiasts began to dig deeper, connecting dots, whispering that perhaps the impossible had finally been achieved. Then came the journalists. A young reporter named Sarah Williams arrived from London, her curiosity piqued by the growing rumors. She found James and Daniel in the workshop, introduced herself with sharp questions and a skeptical tone. "People online are calling this a hoax," she said. "What do you have to say to them?" Daniel did not flinch. They said the same about flight, about electricity, about every idea that challenged their understanding. They will doubt until they can no longer deny. Sarah asked for a demonstration.
Daniel obliged.
The car roared to life, moved steadily across the dirt road, and returned without pause. Sarah filmed everything, her camera capturing not just the machine but the faces of villagers watching with awe. That night, she wrote a story that would travel farther than Daniel had ever imagined. The headline read, "An African inventor claims to have built a self-powering machine.
If true, the world will never be the same."
The spread like wildfire, igniting debates across forums, news panels, and university halls. Scientists dismissed it. Engineers demanded proof. But ordinary people, those tired of rising fuel prices, power shortages, and corporate monopolies, found hope in it. For them, Daniel's invention was not just a machine. It was a symbol that the future could belong to anyone, anywhere. But with attention came scrutiny. Emails flooded in, some offering partnerships, others threatening consequences. Strange cars began to park at a distance from Daniel's workshop, their tinted windows hiding the faces inside. James felt the tension rising, a knot tightening in his chest. He had wanted the world to know, but now he feared what that knowledge might bring. One night, as rain hammered against the corrugated roof, Daniel looked at James and said, "They will come for this. You know that, don't you?" James nodded. "Yes. And we have to be ready."